Hello, I'm Molly Monks, a licensed insolvency practitioner at Parker Walsh. So, HMRC wind up a company, and would it really? And unfortunately, it's yes to both of those. Yes, that they can wind a company up for their arrears, and yes, they really do it. In actual fact, HMRC are the most common creditor for winding up a limited company in the UK. So, HMRC, as we all know, they can be owed VAT, pay-as-you-earn, corporation tax, amongst other things. Those are the common three things that HMRC are owed. And if you don't pay them, they don't just write it off. They will pursue it. HMRC, there's a big organisation, a government department, and I know directors have hoped or thought that HMRC have maybe lost the file, or maybe it's lost in the system and they're not going to pursue me, and they take comfort in that, but it is a false comfort. HMRC don't lose your file, and they've got procedures, systems in place, and there may have been radio silence, but that's usually because they're gearing up to go to the courts to wind the company up. Or you may have spoken to someone at HMRC and you've told them, the difficulties the company's been facing, or difficulties you've been facing personally, which has affected the way you run the company, and you finish the phone call thinking, oh, they understood, they're sympathetic, they're not going to pursue me. Again, that doesn't happen either. As genuine and as heartbreaking your stories are, HMRC won't write off their liability because of it. They have procedures and protocol, and although the individual you spoke to might be very sympathetic, they won't write it off. They have a duty to bring it in. They have a duty to the taxpayer and to the government to bring in the money that they're owed, so it can't be written off, and they don't. It's you have to repay it unless you enter into a insolvency procedure, a formal one. So if you entered into liquidation, for example, then HMRC have no other option than to write off the liability because there's nowhere else for them to go. There's no further action. But HMRC can petition to wind the company up for their arrears of what they're owed. And essentially, there'll be a hearing set in which a judge would decide whether or not to wind the company up. You can attend that, or you could pay a solicitor or a barrister to attend on the company's behalf. But you need a reason as to why the judge shouldn't wind you up, because if you've not paid your arrears and you've not given a good reason as to why you've not paid it, the judge isn't going to allow you to continue to trade to accrue more and more liability. It wouldn't have to put a stop to it by winding you up. But even before it gets to that hearing, the petition is advertised in the London Gazette, and the banks will pick up that notice and they will freeze their bank account with you, with the limited company. So that will stop the trading, and that's even before the hearing, and it's usually without any warning as well. So it can be quite dramatic. The bank account, the company bank account, just gets frozen. Even if there's money in it, it still gets frozen. And the irony is as well is that you may have been making that payment to HMRC because you knew the court hearing was coming up. You won't be able to because your bank's frozen. You can't pay suppliers, you can't pay employees. Essentially, it stops you from trading, and that's before the hearing. So it's obviously it can be very stressful, and I appreciate that. And you might not think you've got any options because you're like, well, I'd pay HMRC if I had the money. I just don't have the money, and you sort of go through this, sort of think that they've lost your file, or they'll be sympathetic, or it's just not going to happen. Unfortunately, it will. And what you can do to protect yourself is get in touch with someone like me, an insolvency practitioner, because we can put in arrangements so that it doesn't get to that position where you wound up through the court. There are informal repayment plans. There's time to pay arrangements. There's Company Voluntary Arrangement, which is a formal debt repayment plan. There's administration, which is packaging the company in a new entity so that it can continue to trade but without its liabilities. or you could enter into a creditor's voluntary liquidation. So there's lots of other things we can put in place before it gets to that position. But don't be comforted by silence from HMRC. They haven't written it off. They haven't lost your file. Essentially what that most likely is that it's gone from one department to another, and that department would be the legal department, and it's taken action to wind you up. So just be very careful with HMRC, and if you need any advice, just get in touch. Okay, thank you.